Aliens spoke of a death world beyond imagination. He just smirked and said, "That's Earth, my planet." Port Halcyon Station thrummed with life, a sprawling trade hub orbiting a gas giant 12 light-years from Seoul. Its corridors bustled with merchants and travelers, their voices blending into a constant hum. Ships docked in vast bays, their hulls glinting under artificial lights. Below, the planet's purple storm swirled, a silent spectacle of untamed power. The station was a crossroads, a place where deals were struck and stories swapped across species. The Starlight Nook bar glowed at the heart of it all. Neon lights bathed the room in soft blues and pinks, casting shadows on crowded tables. Electronic music pulsed gently, weaving through the chatter of a dozen species, some scaled, others feathered, a few faintly luminescent. The air carried a mix of spiced vapors and recycled oxygen, sharp and heady. Patrons sipped drinks that bubbled or glowed, their laughter rising over the steady beat. Marcus Voss held court at a central table, his pale yellow skin catching the neon's glow. His tattered robes, stained from exotic spills, hung loosely over his frame. Thin antennae twitched as he spoke, his voice carrying just enough bravado to pull in listeners. Picture it, folks, a death world. Gravity's twice standard, crushing your bones with every step. The climate swings from fire to ice in hours. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. And the natives? They eat anything. Poison, acid, it doesn't matter. It's fuel to them. Kiro Lark sat perched on a stool nearby, his blue feathers shimmering under the lights. His wide green eyes locked on Marcus, drinking in every word. His wings were tucked awkwardly, betraying his clumsy enthusiasm. "That's incredible, Marcus," he said, voice bright with awe. "How do they even survive that kind of place?" Marcus grinned, waving a hand for emphasis. "Survive? Kiro, they thrive. Built empires on that rock. Fought wars that'd break anyone else." His words spun a web, drawing murmurs from the crowd. Some nodded, caught up in the tale. Others sipped their drinks, skeptical but entertained. Marcus had a knack for stories that danced on the edge of truth, pulling in credits from bets or deals. Behind the bar, the six-armed bartender worked with fluid precision. Two arms polished glasses, others mixed drinks that smoked or sparked. Their compound eyes scanned the room, catching Marcus's exaggerated gestures. "Heard that one before," they muttered, voice low and dry. Few noticed. The bartender had seen it all. Boastful merchants, broken deals, fights sparked by lies. They kept the bar running, a steady presence amid the chaos. The door slid open quietly, and Jonah Reed stepped inside. Short brown hair, plain t-shirt, work pants, nothing flashy. He moved with unhurried ease, blending into the crowd's edges. Taking a seat near Marcus's table, he ordered plain water from a passing server and settled back, listening. His presence felt different, a quiet contrast to the bar's boisterous energy. Steady eyes, a faint curve to his lips, hinted at a deeper confidence. The music swelled slightly, its rhythm weaving through Marcus's tale. "Land there and your ship groans under the pull," Marcus went on, voice rising. "Air burns your lungs. One wrong move, you're done." Kiro's feathers fluffed with excitement, his trust in Marcus absolute. The merchant had taken him under wing months ago, sharing tips on trade routes and ports. To Kiro, Marcus was a hero, his story's gospel. "Could I ever visit a place like that?" Kiro asked, leaning closer. His eyes sparkled with naive wonder. Marcus chuckled, patting Kiro's shoulder. "You, kid? Stick to safe ports. That place for feathers." The crowd laughed, some clapping Kiro's back. His innocence charmed them, a bright spot in the bar's gritty glow. Jonah sipped his water, watching Marcus weave his tale. The crowd grew, drawn by the merchant's flair. Whispers spread about the death world, its impossible dangers. The bartender glanced at Jonah, noting his plain clothes and calm posture. Most patrons flashed wealth or weapons. Jonah didn't. He stood apart, a quiet enigma in the neon haze. "You're the best storyteller, Marcus," Cairo said, voice earnest. "I believe every word." "Good lad," Marcus replied, grinning. "Stick with me. You'll see plenty." The music dipped, laughter filling the gap. The station's hum vibrated faintly through the floor, a reminder of the vast machinery holding this place together. Jonah's gaze stayed steady, his faint smile unwavering. He knew the tale Marcus spun, knew it better than most, but he stayed silent, letting the room buzz. The tension simmered, slow and subtle, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Marcus raised his glass. "To death worlds, may we never set foot on one." Cheers echoed. Kiro joined in, his enthusiasm infectious. Jonah watched, his quiet presence a counterpoint to the noise. Marcus Voss leaned back, his tale of the death world still rippling through the air. His pale yellow skin shimmered faintly, his thin antennae flicking with confidence as he spoke. The crowd hung on his words, their drinks momentarily forgotten. Kiro Lark's green eyes gleamed with awe, his blue feathers quivering slightly. "So, these natives," Kiro said, voice brimming with curiosity, "they really eat poison? Like, on purpose?" His question sparked soft chuckles from nearby patrons, charmed by his wide-eyed enthusiasm. Marcus nodded, his grin sharp and practiced. "Oh yeah, kid. It's their secret. They chew through toxins that'd drop any of us. Built their whole culture on it." His voice carried a merchant's charm, each word pulling the crowd deeper into his story. Whispers spread through the bar, some patrons betting credits on whether Marcus was stretching the truth. Others, caught in the tale's pull, tossed more credits onto a growing pile on the table. Jonah Reed sat quietly, his water glass cool in his hand. His plain t-shirt and steady gaze stood out amid the bar's vibrant chaos. He listened as Marcus spun Earth into a myth, his lips twitching with a faint smile. The electronic music pulsed low, its rhythm syncing with the rising tension. The bartender's 6 arms moved with steady precision, mixing drinks that fizzed or glowed, but their compound eyes flicked toward Marcus, catching the exaggeration in his tone. Then Jonah spoke, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the chatter. "That's Earth. I'm from there." The words landed softly but firmly, like a pebble in a still pond. The bar hushed for a moment. Heads turned. Kiro's feathers fluffed in surprise, his eyes darting between Jonah and Marcus. Marcus let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Earth? You! Come off it, friend. Everyone's got a tall tale around here." He waved a dismissive hand, his antennae twitching with scorn. The crowd snickered, though a few patrons studied Jonah, intrigued by his unshaken calm. His quiet confidence stood in sharp contrast to Marcus's loud bravado. Kiro leaned forward, his voice soft and hopeful. "Are you really from there?" His wide eyes searched Jonah's face, torn between his trust in Marcus and curiosity about this newcomer. Jonah shrugged, his tone dry and easy. "Born and raised. It's not as wild as he makes it, but yeah, that's home." His words carried a casual weight, like he was commenting on the weather. The crowd murmured, some skeptical, others curious. Credits shifted hands as bets adjusted, the air crackling with interest. Marcus's eyes narrowed, his merchant's instinct sensing a challenge to his spotlight. He leaned forward, voice slick with opportunity. "All right, Earthman, if you're so special, let's see it. A wager, something to test that human grit you're claiming." His words dripped with the promise of profit, his favorite kind of game. The bartender paused, one arm hovering over a fizzing drink. "Watch it, Voss," they said, voice low and firm. "Bets like that turn ugly fast in here." Their compound eyes flicked to Jonah, sizing him up. The bar had seen too many boasts spark fights or worse. Jonah met Marcus's gaze, unfazed. "I've survived worse bets," he said, a hint of humor curling his words. "What's the play?" The crowd's buzz grew louder, excitement sparking like a live wire. Credits piled higher on the table. Patrons whispering about human myths, half legend, half possibility. Kiro's heart raced, his feathers trembling slightly. From his perspective, the bar seemed to tighten, the neon lights framing Jonah like a beacon. He wanted to believe this quiet human, wanted a hero to match the stories Marcus spun. "I think he can do it," Kiro blurted, his voice bright and earnest. The crowd chuckled, some patting his shoulder, but his faith held firm. Marcus stood, his movements sharp and theatrical. "All right, Earthman. First trial. The gauntlet of 4 drinks, 4 restricted beverages, lethal to most species. Finish them in under 3 minutes." He gestured to the bartender, who sighed but began preparing the lineup. Quad-strength coffee, capsaicin-infused beer, Orion flower syrup, ion fizz from bioluminescent algae. "Think you're up for it?" Jonah tilted his head, eyeing the challenge with a wry grin. "Sounds like a bad night in college," he said, his tone light but steady. "But sure, I'm in." The crowd roared, some cheering for Marcus's trap, others drawn to Jonah's calm defiance. The music swelled, its beat matching the pulse of anticipation. The bartender slid a data pad across the counter. "Sign this," they said, voice flat. "These drinks kill 93% of known species." Jonah scrawled his name without a pause, his ease unsettling Marcus just enough to make his antennae twitch. The merchant kept his smirk, but a flicker of doubt crossed his face. Kiro bounced on his stool, eyes wide. "You've got this, Jonah," he called, his voice cutting through the noise. The crowd's energy surged, bets flying faster. The neon lights pulsed brighter, casting sharp shadows across the bar. Jonah stood, rolling his shoulders, his quiet confidence a silent challenge to Marcus's bluster. The room held its breath, the tension coiling tighter, ready to snap. The crowd in the starlight nook pressed closer, anticipation crackling in the air. Neon lights flickered, casting a glow over the counter where the bartender arranged 4 drinks, each a glowing threat. Quad-strength coffee steamed, its bitter scent sharp and biting. Capsaicin-infused beer bubbled with a reddish tint, hinting at its fiery kick. Orion flower syrup shimmered, thick and numbing, while ion fizz, brewed from bioluminescent algae, pulsed with faint sparks. Eyes locked on Jonah Reed, who stood with a calm that felt almost defiant in the charged atmosphere. Marcus Voss leaned against the table, his smirk thin and unsteady. 3 minutes, Earthman, he said, his voice slick but edged with doubt. "Let's see if your planet's as tough as you claim." The crowd murmured, some scoffing, others whispering about human endurance, a legend they only half believed. Kiro Lark bounced on his stool, his excitement barely contained. "You can do it, Jonah," he called, his voice bright and unwavering, cutting through the low hum of the music. Jonah studied the drinks, his lips curling into a wry grin. "Reminds me of finals week back on Earth," he said, his tone light, almost teasing. The crowd chuckled, some shaking their heads, unsure if he was joking or reckless. He picked up the coffee, its heat radiating through the glass. The bartender watched, their 6 arms stilled for a moment, their perspective sharp and curious. They'd seen patrons buckle under lesser drinks, but Jonah's steady grip sparked intrigue. Humans were rare in Port Halcyon, their limits a mystery. Jonah took a long sip of the coffee, his face twisting briefly at its bitter intensity. The quadruple strength burned, but he swallowed steadily, setting the glass down empty. "That's one," he said, voice even, wiping his mouth with a casual swipe. The crowd stirred, their murmurs growing louder, a mix of surprise and admiration. The capsaicin beer came next, its red foam hissing softly. Jonah raised it, meeting Marcus's gaze with a quick nod. "To your health," he quipped, then drank. The spice hit like a spark, burning his throat, his eyes watering. He coughed once, a sharp sound, but kept going. The glass hit the counter empty, and he grinned through the sting. "Spicy, but I've had worse." The crowd's murmurs turned to gasps, some clapping, others exchanging stunned looks. Marcus's smirk faltered, his confidence fraying. He hadn't expected Jonah to push this far. Kiro clapped wildly, his enthusiasm infectious. I knew it! Aha! He shouted, drawing laughs from nearby patrons. The bartender's compound eyes gleamed, their silent marveling a contrast to the crowd's noise. Most species would be doubled over by now, but Jonah stood steady, unshaken. The Orion syrup followed, its thick liquid clinging to the glass like honey. Jonah swirled it, his expression curious but calm. He drank, the numbing effect spreading across his tongue, dulling his senses. His jaw tightened briefly, but he finished, setting the glass down with a soft clink. Tastes like bad medicine, he muttered, shaking his head to clear the haze. The crowd's energy surged, credits shifting hands as more bets swung in Jonah's favor. The ion fizz was last, its faint glow pulsing with tiny sparks. Jonah lifted it, his movements deliberate. The drink fizzed against his lips, its strange tang buzzing through his nerves. He drained it in one steady pull, finishing with 13 seconds to spare. The timer beeped, flashing 2:47. The crowd erupted, cheers blending with stunned murmurs. Kiro leapt from his stool, wings flapping clumsily. You did it! He yelled, his voice rising above the noise. Marcus stood frozen, his bravado crumbling. He forced a laugh, but it rang hollow. Beginner's luck, he said, waving a hand, though his doubt was clear. The crowd ignored him, their focus on Jonah, who leaned against the counter, catching his breath. The bartender slid him a water, their voice low. Impressive, human. Very impressive. Their respect was plain, a rare nod from someone who'd seen it all. Jonah nodded, his wry smile returning. Told you. College parties were worse. The crowd laughed, the tension easing like a wave breaking. But Marcus's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. He wasn't ready to concede. All right, Earthman, he said, his voice tight with forced confidence. That was just a up. Let's see you handle real pressure. He pointed toward the door, his smirk returning, though it carried a desperate edge. Kiro grabbed Jonah's arm, his excitement spilling over. You're amazing! What's next? His faith in Jonah burned bright, a spark in the neon haze. The bartender shook their head, sensing trouble brewing. The music quickened, its rhythm mirroring the crowd's growing anticipation. Jonah rolled his shoulders, his calm unshaken. Lead the way, he said, his voice steady, carrying a quiet challenge that cut through Marcus's bluster. The crowd surged forward, eager for the next act, the neon lights pulsing like a heartbeat in the night. The crowd spilled out of the bar, their excitement a tangible hum as they followed Marcus Voss through Port Halcyon's bustling corridors. Merchants haggled in the distance, their voices mingling with the drone of overhead shuttles. Marcus led the way, his steps quick, his confidence a thin veneer over growing unease. Drinks were a warm-up, Earthman, he called over his shoulder, his voice sharp but strained. Let's see you handle something real. The crowd murmured, their bets shifting, anticipation crackling like static. Kiro Lark stayed close to Jonah Reed, his wings twitching with restless energy. You're gonna crush it, Jonah, he said, his voice bright with unshaken faith. His enthusiasm drew smiles from some patrons, while others rolled their eyes at his naivety. The bartender trailed behind, their 6 arms crossed, their tone low and cautious. Voss, you're playing with fire, they muttered, their compound eyes fixed on Jonah, curious yet wary. The station's hum pulsed through the floor, a steady rhythm under the growing tension. Jonah followed, his steps measured, his expression calm. What's the next trick, Marcus? He asked, his tone dry, carrying a hint of amusement. The crowd's chatter faded as they reached the Vector G centrifuge chamber, a training facility buried deep in the station's core. Its sleek walls gleamed under harsh lights, the central treadmill framed by a wide viewing window. A control panel blinked, ready to shift gravity up to 6 times standard, its direction flipping every 30 seconds. For pilots, it was a grueling test. For most, it was a gamble with survival. Marcus gestured to the treadmill, his smirk forced but bold. "The Vector G," he said, his voice carrying a challenge. 2, 3, then 4 times gravity, shifting every 30 seconds. Let's see if your Earth legs hold up." Doubt flickered in his eyes, but he masked it with bravado. The crowd gathered at the viewing window, their whispers swelling. From their perspective, the chamber was a spectacle, part arena, part proving ground. Some murmured about human legends, tales of a species that defied impossible odds. Kiro pressed against the glass, his voice eager. "You've got this, Jonah. Show him." His words cut through the crowd's buzz, sparking laughter from some, skepticism from others. The bartender crossed their arms, their voice a low warning. "This machine's no game. It's broken stronger spacers than him." Their caution hung heavy, but Marcus waved it off, his confidence brittle but holding. Jonah stepped toward the treadmill, his movements relaxed, like he was boarding a familiar shuttle. He stretched lightly, his plain t-shirt shifting over lean muscles. The crowd watched, their bets flying, some on Marcus's trap, others on Jonah's quiet resilience. From their view, Jonah was an enigma, his calm either foolishness or strength. Whispers of human endurance grew louder, stories of a species that thrived in chaos. Marcus punched settings into the control panel, his fingers swift but tense. 2 minutes total, he said, his voice sharp. Walk at 2G, run at 3G, survive at 4G. Fall and you're done. He stepped back, his eyes locked on Jonah, searching for a crack in that steady demeanor. The crowd's anticipation thickened, the chamber's low hum vibrating through their feet. Jonah stepped onto the treadmill, his expression steady, his wry grin flashing briefly. "Sounds like a workout," he said, his tone light but firm. The crowd chuckled, their laughter tinged with nervous energy. The bartender's eyes narrowed, their perspective clinical yet intrigued. They'd seen the Centrifuge crush seasoned pilots. But Jonah's ease was unsettling, a quiet defiance that spoke louder than boasts. The chamber's lights dimmed, the treadmill whirring to life. The control panel beeped, signaling the first gravity shift. The crowd pressed closer to the glass, their breaths held, bets still shifting. Kiro's wings fluttered, his excitement a bright spark in the tense air. Marcus stood rigid, his smirk fading as the machine's hum grew louder. Jonah took a breath, his stance relaxed but ready, his eyes fixed ahead. The station's pulse seemed to sync with the chamber's rhythm, the air thick with expectation. The gravity shifted, slamming twice times standard. Jonah's steps stayed smooth, his stride easy, like walking a familiar path. The crowd gasped, their whispers turning to awe. Marcus's jaw tightened, his doubt deepening. The centrifuge's hum grew sharper, the next shift approaching, and the tension coiled tighter, pulling the crowd deeper into the unfolding challenge. The Vector G centrifuge chamber hummed with a low, menacing growl, its lights dimmed to a stark glow. The treadmill spun beneath Jonah Reed, gravity locked at 2 times standard. His steps remained steady, each footfall deliberate, as if strolling through a familiar Earth park. The crowd pressed against the viewing window, their gasps blending with the machine's rhythm. Whispers of human resilience spread, half-believed tales now taking shape before their eyes. Marcus Voss stood rigid, his confidence eroding, his eyes fixed on Jonah's unshaken form. Kiro Lark's wings fluttered, his voice piercing the tension. "You're doing it, Jonah!" he shouted, his excitement a bright spark in the heavy air. His faith in the human burned unwavering, drawing soft chuckles from some patrons, skeptical glances from others. The bartender watched, their 6 arms still, their perspective sharp and analytical. They'd seen the centrifuge break seasoned spacers, but Jonah's ease was something else. Calm, not reckless, like he'd faced worse. The control panel beeped, signaling the shift to 3 times gravity. The air seemed to thicken, pressing down on the chamber. Jonah's stride shifted to a run, his breathing controlled but heavier now, sweat beading on his brow. His plain t-shirt clung to his frame, muscles straining but steady, The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of awe and disbelief. Most species struggled to stand at 2G. Running at 3 was unthinkable. Yet Jonah kept pace, his focus unbroken. Marcus's jaw tightened, his antennae twitching with unease. He'd expected Jonah to falter, to prove his tales were just boasts. But the human's resilience was unraveling his certainty. He forced a smirk, muttering, "He'll crack soon." The words sounded hollow, even to him. The crowd ignored him, their bets shifting heavily toward Jonah. Credits piling up as the human defied the odds. The panel beeped again, gravity slamming to 4 times standard. Jonah's knees buckled briefly, his body dropping to his hands. The crowd gasped, some leaning closer to the glass, others whispering that this was it, the moment he'd fall. But Jonah braced himself, muscles taut, and pushed back against the crushing force. His breath came in sharp bursts, his face etched with effort. Then impossibly, he performed a single push-up, slow and deliberate, before laughing breathlessly. "Feels like pilot training back home," he said, his voice carrying through the chamber's speakers. The crowd fell silent, stunned. Kiro's wings flared, his shout breaking the quiet. "I knew you could do it," his voice echoed, pulling laughs from the crowd, their awe now undeniable. The bartender's compound eyes widened, their clinical gaze softening with respect. They'd seen nothing like this, not in years of watching spacers test their limits. Inside Jonah's mind, memories flickered, grueling Earth training, endless drills under harsh conditions. The centrifuge's pull was brutal, but it wasn't new. He'd faced gravity's wrath before, in simulations and real-world tests, each one forging a quiet strength he carried now. He pushed forward, his body screaming but holding, driven by a stubborn will to prove Marcus wrong, not for pride but for Kiro's unshaken trust. The treadmill slowed as the timer hit 2 minutes, gravity easing back to standard. Jonah stood, barely winded, wiping sweat from his brow. The crowd erupted, cheers shaking the chamber's walls. Some chanted "Earth," their voices a mix of disbelief and admiration. Marcus stumbled back, his smirk gone, his eyes wide with realization. His tales of the Deathworld weren't just true, they were understated. Kiro rushed to the chamber door as it hissed open, his wings flapping clumsily. "You're incredible," he said, grabbing Jonah's arm. His excitement was infectious, lighting up the crowd's faces. The bartender nodded, their voice low. That was something human, something else. Their respect was clear, a rare acknowledgement from a veteran of Port Halcyon's chaos. Marcus tried to laugh, his voice weak. All right. You've got some grit," he said, but the words lacked bite. The crowd's focus stayed on Jonah, who leaned against the chamber wall, catching his breath. His wry grin returned, but his eyes held a sharper edge, fixed on Marcus. "Told you," he said, his tone light but pointed. "Earth's not just a story." The crowd's energy surged, their cheers carrying through the chamber. Kiro bounced beside Jonah, his faith now a blazing certainty. Marcus's shoulders slumped, his bravado shattered, but his mind was already turning, searching for a way to salvage his pride. The chamber's hum faded, replaced by the crowd's roar, the air thick with the weight of what they'd witnessed. Jonah's calm held steady, a quiet anchor in the storm of awe, as the crowd pushed closer, hungry for what came next. The Vector G chamber's hum faded, replaced by the crowd's roaring cheers, a wave of sound that shook the sleek walls. Jonah Reed stepped off the treadmill, his breath steadying, his plain t-shirt damp with sweat, but his posture unshaken. The crowd chanted, "Earth!" Their voices a blend of awe and disbelief, credits exchanging hands as bets settled. Kiro Lark rushed forward, his wings flapping wildly, his voice bright with triumph. "You're incredible, Jonah," he said, grabbing the human's arm, his excitement lighting up the dim chamber. Marcus Voss stood frozen, his face pale, his antennae limp. His tales of the death world, once spun to dazzle, now felt like a trap he'd set for himself. The crowd's focus stayed on Jonah, their cheers drowning out Marcus's faltering attempt at a laugh. All right, you've got some grit," he said, his voice thin, almost breaking. The words fell flat, ignored by the throng, who pressed closer to the human who defied the impossible. The bartender leaned against the chamber's entrance, their 6 arms crossed, their compound eyes gleaming with quiet respect. "That was something, human," they said, their tone low but warm. "Not many walk out of here like that." Their nod carried the weight of years spent watching spacers break under lesser trials. Jonah met their gaze, his wry grin flickering. "Just another day," he said, his voice light but carrying a steel edge. Kiro bounced beside Jonah, his enthusiasm spilling over. "You showed him. I knew you could." His faith was a beacon, unshaken by Marcus's earlier bluster. The crowd's energy surged, some patting Jonah's shoulder, others whispering about humans, creatures of legend who laughed at gravity and toxins. From Marcus's perspective, the chamber seemed to close in, his shame a sharp sting. He'd built his reputation on tales of Earth, but Jonah's quiet strength exposed his greed, his bets a hollow gamble. Jonah turned to Marcus, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. "Don't play with Kiro's trust," he said, his voice low, cutting through the crowd's noise. "It's worth more than your credits." The words landed like a quiet blow, each one measured, stripping away Marcus's bravado. The merchant's shoulders slumped, his gaze dropping to the floor. The crowd quieted, sensing the shift, their cheers giving way to a heavier mood. Marcus swallowed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, all right," he said, forcing a weak smile. "You win, Earthman." He raised a hand, signaling to the bartender. "Drinks for everyone. My tab." The crowd erupted again, their cheers lighter now, tinged with relief. It was a rare move for Marcus, a merchant known for pinching every credit. But shame drove him to it, a small act to salvage his pride. Kiro's eyes widened, his voice bright. "You're paying? Really?" He turned to Jonah, his grin wide. "This is the best night ever." The crowd laughed, their tension easing, the chamber's stark light softening as the mood lifted. The bartender nodded, already signaling for servers to bring drinks from the bar. "You heard him," they said, their tone dry but approving. "Voss is buying." Jonah leaned against the chamber wall, catching his breath, his grin fading to a quieter smile. He watched Kiro's excitement, the young alien's trust unshaken, even strengthened. The crowd's chants of Earth echoed, but Jonah's focus stayed on Marcus, who stood apart, his usual swagger gone. From Marcus's perspective, the human was no longer just a challenger. He was a mirror, reflecting the merchant's own flaws. The realization stung, but it sparked something new, a flicker of respect beneath the shame. The crowd began to drift back toward the bar, their voices buzzing with stories of the human who'd faced the centrifuge and won. Kiro tugged at Jonah's arm, his excitement unrelenting. "What's Earth really like?" he asked, his voice eager, eyes wide with wonder. Jonah chuckled, his tone warm but guarded. "It's messy, kid, but it's home." His words carried a weight, a hint of untold stories that kept the crowd leaning in, curious for more. Marcus lingered, his mind turning. Jonah's strength wasn't just physical, it was a challenge to rethink his own ways. He glanced at Kiro, then back at Jonah, a new idea forming. The chamber's hum was gone, replaced by the crowd's lively chatter, the air thick with the afterglow of triumph. Jonah's calm held steady, a quiet anchor as the crowd moved, their energy pulling them back to the bar, eager for the night to unfold further. The crowd's cheers lingered in the Vector G chamber, a fading echo as patrons began to drift back toward the bar, their voices buzzing with tales of the human who'd conquered the machine. Jonah Reed stood amid the thinning group, his breath even now, his wry grin softening into a quiet smile. Cairo Lark stayed close, his wings still fluttering with leftover excitement, his trust in Jonah now a solid, unshakable foundation. The young alien's naive heart warmed at the human's integrity, a steady presence that outshone Marcus's flashy stories. Marcus Voss lingered nearby, his shoulders slumped, but his mind already shifting gears. He'd been reeling from the defeat, his greed exposed in the stark chamber lights, but Jonah's proven humanity sparked a new idea. Earth wasn't just a legend, it was a market, hungry for the galaxy's exotic flavors. Marcus cleared his throat, his voice tentative but gaining strength. "Jonah, wait," he said, stepping closer, his antennae perking up slightly. "That was impressive. More than impressive." Jonah turned, his expression calm, his eyes holding a measured gaze. "What's on your mind, Marcus?" he asked, his tone even, carrying no grudge but a hint of caution. The crowd's chatter softened around them, some patrons pausing to listen, the air thick with the afterglow of the trials. Marcus glanced at Cairo, then back at Jonah, his merchant's instinct kicking in. "You proved it. Earth's real and humans, you're built for anything. Imagine trading exotic foods from across the stars to your people. They'd lap it up, literally." His words came faster now, the opportunity pulling him from his shame. "We could partner up. You know Earth's markets. I've got the contacts here. Honest deal, no bets." Kiro's eyes lit up, his voice eager. "That sounds amazing. Earth is a new adventure?" He imagined vast shipments of glowing fruits and spice vapors arriving on Jonah's homeworld, his naive wonder painting it all in bright colors. The bartender, overhearing as they guided the crowd out, grunted in approval. "About time you played straight, Voss," they said, their tone dry but relieved, glad for a peaceful end to the night's chaos. Jonah hesitated, his gaze drifting to Kiro's sparkling eyes, then back to Marcus. He saw the merchant's shift, not just greed, but a flicker of genuine respect. "Honest collaboration, huh?" he said, his voice thoughtful, weighing the potential. Earth could use fresh trades, new flavors to spice up old routines. He nodded slowly, his decision settling. "All right, let's talk details later, but keep it clean." Marcus's face brightened, his antennae twitching with renewed energy. He extended a hand to Kiro first, sealing the initial spark of the deal. "You in, kid. We'll need your enthusiasm." Kiro shook it eagerly, his grin wide. "Absolutely. This is going to be huge." The handshake lingered under the chamber's fading lights, a symbol of the shift from rivalry to alliance. The crowd continued to disperse, their steps light as they headed back to the bar, still murmuring about the human from Earth who'd turned the night on its head. Jonah watched quietly, his wry smile hinting at deeper thoughts, memories of Earth's own hustles, the value of trust earned through action. He clapped Kiro on the shoulder, his voice low. "Stick close, kid. We'll make it work." The bartender led the way out, their 6 arms gesturing for the group to follow. "Bar's waiting. Voss's tab, remember?" Their words drew laughs, easing the group into the station's corridors. The bar's music filtered through faintly, its rhythm softening, a gentle lull signaling the night's reflective close. Marcus walked beside Jonah, his steps lighter, the partnership a fresh path forward. Kiro chattered on, his imagination running wild with visions of galactic trades. "Think about it. Orion syrup on Earth pizza? Or Ion fizz with burgers?" His laughter echoed, pulling smiles from the group. Jonah chuckled, his calm presence a steady guide. The station's hum blended with their voices, the night winding down but alive with possibility. The new alliance a quiet promise amid the stars. The crowd filtered back into the starlight nook, their voices a low murmur as they settled into booths and stools, drinks flowing freely on Marcus's tab. Jonah Reed lingered near the entrance, his simple t-shirt still unchanged despite the night's trials, a quiet reminder of his unassuming start. He rolled his shoulders, the centrifuge's pull a fading ache, his calm presence drawing lingering glances from patrons who now saw him as more than just a stranger. Kiro Lark hovered close, his wings twitching with reluctant goodbye. "You're really leaving already?" he asked, his voice soft but eager. Jonah nodded, his wry smile warm. "Got a ship to catch, kid, but we'll see each other again?" Kiro waved enthusiastically, his feathers fluffed. "I promise I'll visit Earth someday. Imagine me there, trying your college parties." His laughter echoed lightly, pulling a chuckle from Jonah, the promise hanging like a bright thread in the neon air. Marcus Voss approached, his steps humbler now, his antennae still as he extended a hand. "Jonah, thanks for the lesson," he said, his voice steady but sincere. "I needed that." Jonah shook it, his grip firm. "Just keep it honest from here," he replied, his tone even, carrying no judgment but a quiet nudge. Marcus nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes that the night's events a turning point he wouldn't soon forget. The bartender moved through the bar, their 6 arms wiping counters and stacking glasses, the cleanup a rhythmic routine. They muttered under their breath, "Humans? Trouble? But the good kind." Their compound eyes caught Jonah's departure, a subtle nod their farewell, acknowledging the human who'd stirred the night without breaking it. Inside Jonah's thoughts, reflection stirred. Earth's resilience, a quiet pride in his homeworld's grit, tempered by a weary sense of the galaxy's vastness. He'd come to Port Halcyon for a quick stop, not a spectacle, but proving humanity's edge left him both satisfied and drained. The trials echoed in his mind, a reminder that adaptability wasn't just survival, but a bridge between worlds. The station's hum softened as Jonah stepped into the bustling corridors of Port Halcyon, docking bays alive with ships and crews. He wove through the throng, his steps unhurried, the bar's neon fading behind him. Patrons back at the Starlight Nook shared stories of the night, their voices weaving Earth into legend, whispers of a human who downed poisons and defied gravity. A tale that would spread through ports and trades. Marcus sat at a corner table, sketching trade routes on a datapad, his inspiration drawn from Jonah's proof of human appetite. Exotic foods from distant stars, bound for Earth's eager markets, a venture born from humility. His lines grew bolder, the partnership a fresh start, his greed tempered by the night's lessons. Kiro gazed out a viewport, stars stretching endlessly, his dreams alive with Earth's wonders, crushing gravity, wild climates, resilient natives. His faith restored, he imagined adventures ahead, his naive heart stronger for the trust he'd placed and seen rewarded. The neon lights of the Starlight Nook pulsed on, a quiet testament to humanity's triumph, the bar settling into its familiar rhythm. The night wound down, but its echoes lingered, a subtle shift in the station's pulse, hinting at connections forged and horizons expanded.